Hey, Rach.
Hello.
It's been a while. I think you and I last met and spoke about 20 odd years ago.
Yeah,
And
it's definitely last century.
I am so thrilled. I'm so thrilled to have you with me today. And I so appreciate your time.
No problem.
Um, Before we came on, we were kind of talking around a few different subjects. I just want to bring that back into both of our awareness, put them on the table, and then we can see where the conversation takes us. So, we were talking about our purpose and the things that really drive us and matter to us deep down. And we talked about kindness, we talked about compassion, and there was something else that you mentioned as well. We'd go into that for sure. We also talked about the power of belief in healing. And we talked a little bit about purpose and about how that can energize you and activate, I guess, in a way, maybe activate that purpose, regenerate your energy, especially as you move into later life. But it doesn't obviously need to be just around later life. Tell me where you want to start today.
Gosh, let's talk about how people's beliefs shape their behaviour, and
Okay.
especially in relation to healing. So
Mm,
I'll introduce myself.
yeah.
I know you know me, but I'm a nurse who came into nursing late in life because I met some awesome nurses and decided that's what I really wanted to do. And I'm very fortunate to work in some very remote communities in Australia where primary healthcare is pretty poor and conditions aren't great, and access to services is obviously, the tyranny of distance makes a difference to people living so far away. So during most of my time in a hospital, I was a palliative care nurse, which in itself was a great honour to be with people in one of the most vulnerable times of their life. So birth and death,
Yeah.
the opposite ends. You're as helpless at both ends.
Yeah.
And that helped me form a lot of my thinking around how people shape their own journeys through their beliefs. Also, having worked in remote communities and seen how communities, and every community is different, they all have different beliefs around health and how things can affect their health, whether it's because it's a weather event that has been brought about because somebody did the wrong thing at the wrong time, or because somebody did something that wasn't quite right. That's why they've got a stomach problem, and so on. And watching people really, really experience those things because of their beliefs, that's been quite interesting. And as I said to you before, it doesn't matter if they're my beliefs. They believe it, and they believe it enough that it makes them well or ill or worried or happy. So you have to take the whole person. You can't just take sort of the outside, that's somebody with a tummy problem. Okay, I'm going to treat the tummy problem. You have to look at the whole person in context of where they are, who's around them, their part in the community. And because that's really important, especially in our Aboriginal communities. It's not just one person you see. You just see that one person as part of the community, and that's really important to look at their relationships. So children, for example, aren't brought up in the nuclear family, mum and dad style. They're brought up with aunties, lots of aunties, and we probably wouldn't call them aunties because they're not directly aunties, but aunties and uncles, and lots of grandparents and lots of mothers. And so the parents, the biological parents, their job is just to love the children. They just love the children. And things like making sure that they're fed properly sometimes comes down to grandma. Making sure that they behave might be an auntie. So this whole family group is responsible for raising the child. So it's not dissimilar to it takes a village to raise a child. But I like the fact that the mum and dads are just there to love them. They're just there to love them. They don't have to worry about that other stuff because that's all taken care of. But mum and dad might be an auntie to another child that they actually do have to tell them, you can't do that or whatever. So this is the background that you're coming from when you're working with people from communities. So everything that happens to me happens to all of us. and something that happens to him happens to me. And we don't quite understand that in our Western model of how things work. If you break your leg, you broke your leg.
Yeah.
But it can be viewed differently depending. And it's not just that culture, it's other cultures that I've worked with as well. They all have different beliefs, and you just have to respect that and understand that that's them. That's the whole of them. Even people that have no beliefs are to be treated holistically also.
Yeah. I've got a question for you about that. As you were talking, I'm just wondering how you integrate your own beliefs, your own background in a seamless way in order to really build that connection and rapport and that trust with people.
Firstly, listen. Just listen. Right? You can't trust someone that doesn't listen to you. If they're just on broadcast, you can't trust them because you're trying to tell them something and they can't hear you. So you listen. And what I have found really helpful is that open communication. So someone tells you something, you repeat it back to them in slightly different terms, and eventually between you work out what the situation is. So you say, so what you're telling me is da 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 da, and they go, yeah, a little bit, but a bit more like this. And so you work on that until you get it where they want to be. It's very complicated to go into, but there's also this thing about not babying people, right? Because English is your fourth language or something, doesn't mean I have to shout louder or, more gestures and stuff. So treating people as adults, as functioning adults. And for our remote communities, what's most important is your story. So they know all their own stories because they know from 60,000 years ago who's related to who can't marry who, da, da, da. But you turn up from another place a very long way away. They don't know who you are. They don't know if you're going to stay for a day or a year or whatever. So I found it very useful to introduce myself as a mother, a grandmother, a wife. I don't like pizza either, so to humanize myself, humanize my role, rather than I'm a nurse and I'm going to wag my finger and make you do what I say. It's like, no, I'm going to sit down with you and we're going to be human to human and work it out together. So that's kind of, it's not a trick. It's just, I think that's how we should be with everybody. First of all, listen.
I was just thinking exactly the same thing, that this is not specific to these remote communities that you're talking about. It is how we should be talking to everybody and how the best connections are formed, the best communication comes from that listening first and foremost. And I want to just talk to you briefly a little bit about that, because for the last 35 years, I have used my body as a listening tool, as a tuning fork, basically. And I find that if I listen through my body and absorb sound through my senses, that I have a much more accurate interpretation of what's being said that bypasses my filters. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And especially if you're dealing with men. If you're asking men how they are and they say, I'm absolutely fine, and in you feel actually you're not, and I actually do need you to come and sit down, I want to take your blood sugar, or I want to just check you out because you're telling me you're fine and you're standing up straight and you're looking good, but there's something that's telling me you're not fine. And it's not the words, it's something in me that's telling me you're not fine. And that I've never had my radar wrong for that. Because men especially, because they don't want to, they're like, no, everything's good, and
I'm good.
And you think, no, I'm not going to let you go until we've had a look. And you always find something, and you'd be like, you didn't take your blood pressure tablets last week, did you? And they'll be like, well, no, I ran out, and and you're like, okay, should we sort you out your prescription? Oh, that would be nice.
You know what you're saying to me is so interesting, because what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that ultimately when you're listening with I sort of think of it like a funnel, and I have my funnel wide open when I'm in listening mode like that. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm absorbing all of the input, and that includes input that they've absorbed from their environment to help inform all of the data that's coming in. And actually then what happens is you get a sense. And so would you call that sense your instincts or your intuition or something like that?
I think I'd probably call it instinct, because I can be somewhere and not pay any attention to anybody, and nothing, puts the spidey senses tingling. But then you can be somewhere and you can turn around and look at someone, and you may never have a conversation with that person ever, but you can look at them. And I've done this, and I've looked at them, and I've looked at their feet, and I've thought, gosh, your feet are swollen. Maybe you need to go and get your heart checked out, but you can't run up to strangers in the supermarket. Yeah. I'm a nurse, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that you get that, you can see how people hold themselves, and you don't even realize that you're sensing that, but it's because it's so far back in your mind. It's almost like a memory of how people should be. And if you see something that's not quite right, you kind of feel it. So you can see sometimes if people are holding their shoulder a little bit wrong, or their face looks tense, or just little things, like I know that some conditions have little clues and they're not always obvious. And so there's that sort of stuff. But then there's also somebody that's sitting there that looks right as rain.
Yeah.
And you're like, something's off. Don't know what it is. Something's off. And if it's somebody you can sort of have a chat, and then you might find out that they've had a really awful week and they've been really sad, and they're really glad that someone's asked them how they are, and it's nice to be able to offload. But yeah, I always listen to that. I try not to pester the public. But I do listen to it. Truck drivers are the worst. I stare at their calves in a really bizarre way. I'm like, oh, you've sat down for too long. Oh my goodness. I have this, I'm like looking at the circulation in there, because they all wear shorts here because it's so hot. So some of these are big lads as well. And I always look at their calves and I'm like, oh no. So they probably think I'm just this weird woman that's just checking out their legs. I don't know.
Oh God. Okay, so do you know what I've been doing as you've been talking? I've actually been checking what my body's looking like and thinking, oh my gosh, what am I communicating? and what is interesting about that is, I think what we're talking about here is a combination of things. I think there are levels of this where you draw on your experience and then you draw on what's current to make that instant analysis. But actually, when you're having these deeper conversations, what you're doing is you're accumulating a lot more information and data. To ensure that you are communicating really accurately. So it's really interesting. And I think we all know that. I knew that, but I hadn't really thought of it in that way before, that we're doing it on a number of different levels. And I think one of the things we sort of briefly touched on earlier was around intention, and we talked around it in terms of beliefs around healing. But I think it applies to this as well. I think once you activate that really intentional listening, that then activates everything that goes along with it to enable you to support that person in whatever situation they're in as best you can.
I can give you a really good example. I know I keep giving these nursing examples, and I apologize to anybody that's not kind of mad about clinical stuff. I was in a clinic with another nurse. A young lady of about 15 came in with her family. So it was her auntie and the siblings. And they brought her in because she was breathless. And she's a known asthmatic. And they just said, oh, she just can't get her breath. We don't know what's wrong. So the nurse that I was with looked in her records, said, oh, she's asthmatic. And then she started going, I bet you didn't take your puffer. You didn't take your puffer, did you? You're supposed to take your puffer. And this girl's got her head down like this, got her head down. Mm-hmm. She went, well, if you don't take your puffer, you're not going to, you're always going to feel like this. She was telling her off. And I'm looking at this kid and I'm thinking, that's not what it is. Because the auntie's like, no, she took a puffer. And she said, no, she's just telling you she's taking a puffer. She's not taking a puffer. And she huffed off to the room to get puffer from the pharmacy cupboard. And I just crouched on the floor and just down at eye level with this young girl. And I said, you have in trouble with, when you get your women time, your period time? She's like,
yeah.
I said, is that real heavy for you? She's like, yeah.
Yeah.
I said, okay, all right. I'm going to have a word with the other nurse. We'll see what we can do, right? So the other nurse comes back and here's the puffer. Make sure you take the puffer. I said, while we're here, can we just quickly do a finger prick test? They're so simple. We've got point of care testing. There's none of this sending it off to a lab. We can tell right there.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't need to do that. I said, well, it's good practice. We can just, it's not a bad thing. We'll do that anyway. Just humor me. I'm always like, humor me. We did the blood prick, and it came back that this poor kid was severely anemic.
Wow.
Now, if you're horribly anemic, you can't catch your breath, you have no energy, the whole of your body system is slow, you're tired, and especially with young girls that are just starting their periods, it can be a real problem. And so this other nurse went, oh my God, that's really low. She went, well, I know we haven't got any iron tablets. And I said, well, at that level, we should be thinking about giving the injections, because there are injections that you give that will bolster them up. So she said, oh, yes, you're probably right. So we ended up with this poor kid getting told off with puffers. But in the end, she actually got what she needed in an injection form and came back in the next couple of days to get the next one. Now, if I hadn't have been in that consult with that nurse who was so busy shouting, because she's in the position of power, right? So she's the nurse, she's up here, and the patient is here. So she's talking down to this kid. Oh, well, it's your fault. Your health is your fault. You shouldn't, you must, you mustn't. And there's me looking at this child. She only was a child, really, and going, that doesn't look like asthma to me. This poor kid can't even hold herself up. She's just exhausted. So by opening the conversation quietly and gently, face to face, not shouting it across the room, and I just put my hand on her hand, and so I just very gently brought us in together into a small space together, that safe space, because that's the most important thing. So I brought us into the safe space and just asked her those questions, because they're also personal questions and they're women's business questions, and you can't do that. Say if her uncle was in there, you wouldn't be able to have that conversation because there's very big separation. And she was able to tell me that. So of course then your clinical thinking is, okay, right, that could possibly be anemia.
Yeah.
So she might have said something else. She might have said, no, that's all fine, but I'm really unhappy, or something. Then you lead on to what they're going to. So the nurse with the puffer had absolutely no insight at all into this child. And she knew her because she saw her regularly. I had more insight into the child that I'd never seen before, because I watched her body and watched what she was doing and the clues she was giving me, and the worried face of the family. They've seen a lot of people have asthma. They've seen people with asthma. They know what it looks like. Auntie's saying she's taking her puffers. And the child's body was just limp and loose and tired. And I felt that tiredness for her. I wouldn't say that I experienced her symptoms, but sometimes when you see someone doing something, your body does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's that very human thing of, someone yawns, you yawn. And I just thought, no, this isn't right. So that was one really good example of when you look and you listen with your eyes, if you like, and you listen with your feelings. And it's rare that I get it. I'm not anybody's expert, but it's rare that I'm wrong if it's something like that. It's like something's not right. And I think she's doing okay now, this young one. But yeah.
It's really interesting because as you finished up there, I was just reminded about what you said earlier on about viewing the body holistically. And that's actually what you were doing. You weren't zoning in on one thing, you were zoning in on the whole picture. And it also makes me think about something we spoke about just a little bit earlier before we came on around kindness. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about that?
I once heard this thing, and I've thought about it a lot. I've thought about it a lot over 10 years. It's just one little phrase, and I think about it a lot, and I think, do I still think that? And I'm like, yeah, I do. So it is, if you have the choice between being right and being kind, be kind. Yeah. You don't always have the choice, because sometimes you have to be right for some reasons. But if you have the choice, be kind. It doesn't matter if you're not right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if someone says, my green trousers, I really love my green trousers, and their trousers are blue. You go, aren't they gorgeous? They're just gorgeous. It doesn't matter. So, and I revisit that sentence over and over, because I check myself. Am I still there? Am I still in that space? About kindness. And kindness is not, it's something that you can express very simply. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It's just it's a smile. It's it's talking to someone, or smiling at someone, or just someone drops something, picking it up and give it to them. Just be kind. There's not enough of it. And that, what I want on my headstone, if I ever get buried, if they ever catch me, is I want, and I've already told my husband what I want on my headstone. I want kindness matters. That's the only quote I want, because that's my kind of core belief. That's what drives me in everything. And even if I have to do something that isn't pleasant, and you do, as a nurse, you have to do things that aren't very nice and people don't like them very much. But you can do things with kindness. You don't just run in and whack a needle into someone and run out again. You come in and say, hey, look, I know this isn't very nice, but we've got to get it done. I'm sorry, it's going to be a bit sore, but I promise I'll get it done as quickly as I can. And you do things kindly, and that's so much nicer than, right, oh, we've got to do this. And out you go again, as though they're just a piece of meat in a butcher's window. These are people. And
do you know what? Sorry, Rachel, finish what you were going to say.
I said people are precious.
They are, yeah. And we never know, actually, how profound an effect we're having on people when we are kind. I'm going to give you an example in a minute, but what's also interesting to me is, whenever I've had blood taken, I remember the nurses that are like that. They make an impact on me. And because I know it takes a little bit of forethought to do that, and a little bit of self-awareness and understanding of people, of human nature.
Yeah.
But yesterday I was catching a cab, and I had meditation on my mind. Anyway, I got talking to this guy in the cab, and he was we were talking about self-awareness. I don't know how we got onto it, but I think I started off by asking him how he was, actually. And he said, "You've made my day." And I went, wow. I was like, tell me a little bit about your day. And we got talking. We talked about self-awareness, talked about meditation, and he made a huge impact on me. I'm gonna write something up about it, because I want to remember everything and honor him, I guess, through the words. That's part of what I do. But he said, nobody ever asked me how I am and really wants to know.
Wow.
And he sees hundreds of people a week, and it's just quite shocking, isn't it? To think that we can be that self-absorbed. But was there another word that you said to me in terms of purpose? I know kindness is like at the core of you.
Compassion is another important, very, very important word. So compassion and kindness, I think, are quite different. So kindness is something that you can do without really, you don't actually have to invest emotionally, particularly, to be kind. You can just be kind and be a good, nice, kind person. But compassion, I think, if it's not hurting you a little bit, you're not doing it right. And I know people don't want to hear that, but I think it's true. Yes, because it's deep and it's visceral. So I'll give you another example from my varied nursing career. I had a gentleman who I was looking after in palliative care. He had cancer of the throat, and he was struggling with a lot of things, and he'd get quite breathless and frightened, and we'd give him medication so that he could control his breathing and so on and so forth. It was a night shift, and I was in the treatment room doing stock take or something, so I'm visible from the door. And I'm just tootling around, probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, doing, trying to keep busy and not fall asleep. And he knocks on the door, like knocks on the window, and I can see him. And I'm like, I'll be with you in a minute, thinking that he just wants some medication. And then he knocked on the door again, and I saw his face, and his face, he was in terror, absolute terror in his face. And I thought, oh my God, what's happening? So I opened the door inwards, and he leapt into my arms. Luckily he was only a little guy, but he leapt into my arms. So I had him cradled like a baby, and I sort of slid down the wall in the corridor, and I had him cradled like this. And my colleagues going, oh, well, we need to put him on the floor. And I said, I'm not letting go of him. I am not letting go of him. And I held him. And so they went and they got they got the doctor and the crash cart and everything. And there really wasn't much that could be done for this fella. He just needed to be held. And I held him while he died. And it was hard, but he just needed to be held as he passed away. So I'm sitting on the corridor floor holding this man. And that's compassion. Not because I'm a good person or anything, but because he needed human contact, and he found me. And I understood that. And I didn't throw him on the floor and stick pads on him or put him on a trolley and push him around the corner. I went, okay, I can see what you need. You need someone to hold you while you die. And that was that. And that affected me for a long time. I took a long time to come back from that, because it was so, I had to give so much in that moment for that man, as he couldn't breathe. And it was quite distressing. And there was nothing nurses are amazing. My colleagues are amazing. There was nothing we could do for this guy. He just needed to be held. And that's all I could do. We didn't even have a language in common. We had nothing in common. But I'd nursed him for so long, he trusted me. And he came to find me. And I'm like, okay, that was meant to be. And then after he passed away, his brother came up, and he said, what happened? I said, oh, he passed away. And he said, can you tell me what happened? I told him what happened. And he hugged me. And he said, I'm so glad it was you. I'm so glad it was you. And he was hugging me. And I'm like, oh, God. It took me a long time to get over that, because it was such a, it dragged it out of me. It dragged it from the very center of my being to be that compassionate. It was hard. And I did take some time off after that, because it was quite confronting for me as well. But then I got, I worked on myself a bit and healed up and reflected on it, and probably wrote a couple of poems like I normally do. And, and just, okay, that's okay. We're okay. It's all good. You needed to give of yourself. You've replenished. Now you can go back. So that is what I understood to be compassion, because I felt that being pulled, like literally pulled out of me. And I think that's how compassion should feel, not just that kind of self-worthiness that people, I'm so compassionate, no, you should, this should hurt you. You should feel this leaving your body. It's a big thing. So, yeah.
There's definitely a ripping as it happens, or a ripping and a joining, where I was just thinking as well, when I'm struggling to find the exact words for it actually, but I was also just thinking about when you were telling that story, that he trusted you with his life at the point of death. And, I love you for doing that. I really do. I think that things like that, when you do that, that travels. It's never your intention, but it always travels. So that would travel down his family and give them just immense comfort.
That someone was there. Yeah,
that the right person was there.
Yeah.
So as we finish up for today, I just want to understand, or just, hand over to you if there's anything else that you would like to share today that you think people could benefit from. I know some people are right at the very beginning of their personal development journey, and you've been on that journey for quite a while. Wondering if you've maybe got any tips or any insights you can share, any challenges that you've overcome in terms of deepening your own self-awareness and accelerating your own development. I'm a great believer that you can pick up things in books, but where this happens is in real life, in the nitty-gritty of our day-to-day life, our messy relationships, our challenges. And that's where we can really measure our progress and understand where the gaps are and our blind spots. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I agree. I think it's only through sometimes viewing yourself through others' eyes that you can see how much progress you're making. My big piece of takeaway advice, if you want to continue to develop yourself, is to be kind. Just get the feel for it. Do something kind every day. And the more you do it, the more you want to do it. And the more you do it, the better of a person you become, and you are able to look yourself in the eye. Because sometimes you look in the bathroom mirror and all you're worried about is your hair. And how often do we actually look ourselves in the eye and go, you did something awesome yesterday when you made a cup of tea for Mrs. So-and-so because she was tired. That was bloody awesome. Well done, you. Right? So be kind. Just do kind things. You don't have to be a saint. You don't have to not swear. You don't have to, wear Marks and Sparks knickers up to your belly button. Just be kind, because we are literally all just walking each other home. That's all we're doing. So let's make it nice. Let's make it nice for each other. Even the roughy, tufty, pain in the ass people, give them a bit of kindness. And if they don't accept it, smile and move on.
That's so powerful, honestly. I'm so grateful to you for joining me today. I hope we'll have the opportunity to chat some more in the future. I'm just going to stop the recording now.
Okay.
But stay on with me. Stay on.